The sound of coyotes echoed across the barren landscape as Emma O'Malley clutched her baby sister to her chest, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. At 18, she never imagined she'd be standing alone on the dusty Oregon Trail, watching the wagon train disappear into the horizon without her. The year was 1867, and being abandoned in the Wyoming Territory was as good as a death sentence. "Hush now, Sarah," Emma whispered, bouncing the feverish 6-month-old in her arms. "Someone will come back for us." But even as the words left her lips, she knew they were lies. No one was coming back. Not after the cholera had taken her parents 3 days prior, and certainly not after the wagon master had declared her sister's illness too dangerous to risk the rest of the train. The sun beat down mercilessly as Emma settled beneath the lone cottonwood tree where they'd left her. The small bundle of supplies they'd spared her wouldn't last more than a few days. Sarah's cries grew weaker by the hour, and Emma felt hope slipping away like water through cupped hands. On the second day, the distant thunder of hoofbeats stirred her from a fitful sleep. Emma clutched her father's old pistol, the one possession she'd insisted on keeping when they'd forced her from the wagon. Her finger trembled against the trigger as a lone rider appeared on the horizon. Grant Ironwood had been tracking a mountain lion that had been preying on his cattle when he spotted something unusual beneath the old cottonwood tree that marked the bend in the trail. In his 30 years, he'd seen his share of tragedies on these unforgiving plains, but the sight of a young woman clutching a baby, pistol raised with shaking hands, still managed to stop his heart. "Easy there, miss," Grant called, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. His deep voice carried across the distance between them. "I'm not looking for trouble. Stay back," Emma warned, though her voice cracked from thirst. "I'll shoot if I have to." Grant studied her from beneath the brim of his wide hat. Her dress was torn and dirty, her face sunburned and streaked with tears, but her eyes, fierce and determined, told him everything he needed to know. "My name's Grant Ironwood," he said, dismounting slowly. "I own the Double Creek Ranch about 10 miles west of here." "Looks to me like you and that little one could use some help." Emma's vision blurred with tears. "My sister's sick. The wagon train left us behind. They said she'd infect the others." Grant approached cautiously, leading his horse. He could see now that the baby was flushed with fever, her breathing labored. "May I?" he asked, reaching out. After a moment's hesitation, Emma allowed him to place a weathered hand on Sarah's forehead. "Teething fever, most likely," he said with relief. "Not cholera." "My sister's youngest had the same last spring." He met Emma's gaze. "What's your name, Miss?" "Emma O'Malley," she replied, lowering the pistol at last. "This is Sarah." "Well, Miss O'Malley, I can't leave you out here. There's a storm brewing and night's coming faster than you'd like." He gestured to his horse. "My ranch isn't far. We've got a proper doctor in town who can look at your sister." Emma hesitated. Her mother's warnings about strange men echoed in her mind, but Sarah's whimpering made the decision for her. "Thank you, Mr. Ironwood." Grant helped Emma onto his horse, placing the baby securely between them before mounting behind her. As they rode, Emma felt the solid warmth of his chest against her back, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. The Double Creek Ranch sprawled across a lush valley, its whitewashed buildings gleaming in the late afternoon sun. A wide creek, actually two, that joined near the property, Emma would later learn gave the ranch its name. As they approached, several ranch hands paused in their work to watch curiously. "Mrs. Finch," Grant called as they reached the main house. An older woman with silver-streaked hair appeared on the porch, her eyes widening at the sight of Emma and the baby. "Land sakes, Grant, what have you brought home now?" she exclaimed, hurrying down the steps. "Found them abandoned on the trail," Grant explained, helping Emma dismount. "The little one's running a fever. Could you fetch some of that willow bark tea you made for Jenny's boy, Mrs.?" Finch clucked sympathetically, reaching for the baby. "Come inside, child. You look about ready to drop." Emma reluctantly released Sarah into the housekeeper's capable hands and followed her into the sprawling ranch house. The interior was surprisingly refined, with sturdy furniture and colorful quilts that spoke of a woman's touch. "My sister Margaret decorated before she moved to Denver with her husband," Grant explained, noticing Emma's gaze. "She insisted I couldn't live like a savage if I intended to be a proper rancher." Mrs. Finch settled Emma at the kitchen table, placing a cup of cool water before her. "Drink slowly now," she advised. "I'll tend to your sister." Emma watched anxiously as the older woman mixed herbs and heated water, preparing a mild tea for the baby. Grant moved about the kitchen with surprising efficiency, pulling out bread and preserves. "Eat," he said simply, setting a plate before her. "You can't care for your sister if you collapse." The food was the most delicious thing Emma had tasted in weeks. As she ate, Grant sent a ranch hand to fetch the doctor from town. "You'll stay here until you decide what you want to do," he said, making it clear it wasn't a question. "There's a train headed east from Laramie in 2 weeks if you're aiming to find family." Emma swallowed hard. "We don't have any family. Our parents died on the trail. We were headed to Oregon to start fresh." Something in Grant's expression softened. "Well, there's no rush to decide. You can stay as long as you need." That night, Emma slept in a real bed for the first time in months, with Sarah in a makeshift cradle beside her. The doctor had confirmed Grant's assessment a teething fever, not cholera, and prescribed cool compresses and willow bark tea. By morning, Sarah's fever had broken, and she was gurgling happily in Emma's arms. Over the following days, Emma found herself settling into life at Double Creek. Mrs. Finch, a widow who'd been with Grant since he'd established the ranch 7 years earlier, took Emma under her wing, teaching her the running of a ranch household. "That man would live on coffee and jerky if I let him," she confided one afternoon as they prepared supper. "Never known someone so capable with cattle and so hopeless with a cooking pot." Emma learned that Grant had come west after the Civil War, using money he'd saved from his service to purchase land when many larger ranches were breaking up. He ran cattle, raised horses, and had a reputation for fair dealing that earned him respect throughout the territory. What surprised Emma most was Grant's gentleness with Sarah. The big, weathered cowboy would spend evenings bouncing the baby on his knee, telling her stories about the ranch animals as if she understood every word. Sarah, for her part, seemed enchanted by his deep voice and the way his mustache twitched when he smiled. "You're good with her," Emma remarked one evening as Grant cradled the sleeping baby. He looked down at Sarah with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. "Always wanted children," he said simply. "Haven't been blessed that way yet. You're not married." Emma asked, then blushed at her forwardness. Grant shook his head. "Came close once. She decided Wyoming winters weren't to her liking and returned east." His tone was matter-of-fact, but Emma sensed an old wound there. As the days passed, Emma found herself watching Grant the way he sat tall in the saddle, how his men respected but never feared him, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at Sarah. At 29, he was both younger than she'd initially thought and somehow ageless, his face weathered by sun and wind rather than years. The promised 2 weeks came and went, and neither Emma nor Grant mentioned her leaving. Instead, she gradually took over household duties from the aging Mrs. Finch, who was grateful for the help. Emma discovered she had a talent for bookkeeping, a skill Grant sorely lacked, and soon found herself managing the ranch accounts as well. "You've got a head for numbers," Grant commented one evening as they sat on the porch, Sarah sleeping peacefully inside. "My father would have appreciated that. He always said I could track a steer across bare rock but couldn't add 2 and 2 without using my fingers." Emma laughed, a sound that had become more frequent in recent weeks. "My father was a schoolteacher before he caught gold fever. He taught me mathematics when I was young." "What took your family west?" Grant asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. Emma's smile faded. "After the war, there wasn't much left for us in Missouri. Confederate raiders burned our town and my father's school with it, Oregon promised a new start. She sighed. Instead, it gave them unmarked graves somewhere in Nebraska. Grant's hand covered hers briefly. "I'm sorry, Emma." The touch of his calloused fingers sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the coffee. Emma found herself increasingly aware of Grant's presence, the scent of leather and pine that clung to him. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hands, large and work-roughened, could be incredibly gentle. In early autumn, trouble came to Double Creek. A band of cattle rustlers hit several neighboring ranches, and tensions in the territory ran high. Grant began keeping his men closer to home, and Emma noticed he carried his rifle more often than not. "I don't want you or Sarah venturing far from the house," he told her one morning as he prepared to ride out with his foreman. "These men are desperate, and desperate men do foolish things." Fear clutched at Emma's heart as she watched him ride away. When had this man become so important to her? 3 days later, shots rang out near the north pasture. Emma was in the kitchen with Sarah when Mrs. Finch burst in, face pale. "Rustlers," the older woman said tersely. "The men are engaged with them near the creek bend." Emma's heart lurched. Grant leading them, as always. Mrs. Finch began gathering medical supplies. "Emma, take Sarah to the root cellar. It's safest there if they come this way." Emma hesitated only briefly before gathering her sister and heading for the trapdoor in the pantry. The root cellar was cool and dark, smelling of earth and preserved vegetables. Sarah, now nearly 10 months old, squirmed in her arms, sensing her tension. "Hush, sweet girl," Emma whispered, straining to hear what was happening above. The gunfire had stopped, but that could mean anything. It felt like hours before the cellar door opened, revealing Grant's face, streaked with dirt and sweat but blessedly whole. "It's over," he said, helping her up. "We drove them off." Emma clutched Sarah with one arm and threw the other around Grant's neck, relief making her bold. She felt him stiffen in surprise before his arms came around both her and the baby, holding them tightly. "Anyone hurt?" she asked against his shoulder. "Tom took a bullet in the arm, but he'll mend. We lost a few head of cattle." Grant pulled back slightly, looking down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "All I could think about was getting back to you two." That night, after Sarah was asleep, Emma found Grant on the porch, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the darkened landscape. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the autumn chill. Grant shook his head. "Too much thinking." Emma settled beside him on the porch swing. "About the rustlers, about you." Grant's directness startled her. "Emma, you've been here nearly 4 months now. Winter's coming. I need to know what you're planning." The question hung between them. Emma looked out at the land that had become home, at the stars that seemed brighter here than anywhere she'd ever been. "I don't want to leave," she admitted softly. "But I don't want to take advantage of your kindness either." Grant set his glass down and turned to face her fully. "It's not kindness that makes me want you to stay." The moonlight silvered his features, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. Emma's heart raced as he reached for her hand. "I've been alone a long time," Grant continued. "Built this place from nothing, made it successful, but until you and Sarah arrived, I never realized how empty it was." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I'm not a man of fancy words, Emma. But I've come to care for you both more than I thought possible." Emma felt tears gathering. "We care for you too. I'm asking if you might consider making this arrangement permanent." Grant's voice was steady, but Emma could feel the tension in his hand. "Not just for convenience or safety, but because we could build something good together." "Are you proposing marriage, Mr. Ironwood?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am," he smiled slightly. "Though I'm making a mess of it, I fear." Emma thought of the girl she'd been on the trail, frightened, desperate, with nothing but a sick baby and a dying hope. She thought of the woman she'd become here, strong, capable, valued. And she thought of Grant, who'd given them not just shelter but a home, not just safety but belonging. "Yes," she said simply. The word hung between them for a moment before Grant pulled her gently toward him. His kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Emma responded. His arms encircled her, and Emma felt as though she'd finally found the place she was meant to be. They were married by the circuit preacher 2 weeks later in the ranch house parlor, with Mrs. Finch weeping happily and the ranch hands standing awkwardly in their Sunday best. Sarah, dressed in a gown Emma had sewn from one of Margaret's old dresses, watched wide-eyed from Mrs. Finch's arms. That night, as Emma stood nervously in the bedroom, now their bedroom, Grant entered with a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said, setting it on the dresser. "Been saving it." Inside was a delicate gold locket. Grant opened it to reveal a tiny daguerreotype of Sarah on one side. The other side was empty. "Thought we might add to it someday," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "A family portrait, perhaps?" Emma let him fasten it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin. "It's beautiful, Grant. Not half as beautiful as you." His hands rested on her shoulders, warm and steady. "I want you to know something, Emma. I never expected to find you, but now that I have, I'll spend every day trying to deserve you." Emma turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his face. "You already do." Their kiss deepened, and Emma felt the last of her nervousness fade away. This was Grant, her husband, who had saved her when all seemed lost, who loved Sarah as his own, who looked at Emma as though she were the sunrise after the longest night. Winter settled over Double Creek Ranch, bringing with it howling winds and deep snow that isolated them for weeks at a time. But within the sturdy walls of their home, Emma found a warmth unlike any she'd known. The long evenings were filled with conversation, with Grant teaching her to play chess and Emma reading aloud from the books he'd collected over the years. Sarah thrived, taking her first steps across the parlor floor on Christmas Day, tumbling into Grant's waiting arms with a peal of delighted laughter. "She has your determination," Grant remarked, swinging the baby high. "Heaven help us when she's older." Emma watched them, her heart full. "She'll need it growing up in Wyoming. She'll have everything she needs," Grant promised. "Everything I can give her." As winter gave way to spring, Emma discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled Grant with a joy so profound it transformed him. He would press his hand against her still flat stomach in wonder, planning aloud for the new addition to their family. "If it's a boy, perhaps we'll name him after your father," he suggested one evening as they sat by the fire. Emma leaned against his shoulder. "And if it's a girl?" "Then she'll be as beautiful and strong as her mother," Grant said, dropping a kiss on her head. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer months. Sarah, now walking confidently and beginning to form words, seemed fascinated by Emma's growing belly. "Baby," she would say, patting Emma gently. "That's right, sweet girl," Emma would answer. "Your brother or sister is growing in there." Grant expanded the house, adding a nursery adjacent to their bedroom. He carved a cradle from pine, polishing it until it gleamed, and hung a small mobile of wooden animals above it. "My father taught me woodworking," he explained when Emma admired his handiwork. "Said a man should be able to build what his family needs." In late autumn, just as the first snow threatened, Emma gave birth to a son with Grant's dark hair and her green eyes. They named him William after Emma's father. "He's perfect," Grant whispered, cradling the newborn as Sarah peered curiously at her brother. "Our family is perfect." Emma watched them, her husband and their 2 children, and marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just over a year. From abandoned and desperate on the trail to beloved wife and mother in a home filled with warmth and security. As William grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Grant's reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spread, bringing buyers from as far as Denver and Salt Lake City. Emma's careful management of the accounts allowed them to purchase adjacent land, expanding their holdings and their herd. When Sarah turned 5, Grant began teaching her to ride on a gentle pony he'd trained especially for her. Emma watched from the porch, William on her hip, as father and daughter circled the corral. "She's a natural," Grant called proudly. "Got a good seat and steady hands." Sarah beamed at the praise, her dark braids bouncing as the pony trotted. "Look, Mama, I'm riding like Papa." "I see you, darling," Emma called back. "You're doing wonderfully." That night, after the children were asleep, Emma found Grant standing by Sarah's bed, watching her slumber. "Sometimes I can hardly believe she's really ours," he said quietly as Emma joined him. "Remember how tiny she was when you first came here, feverish and frightened," Emma agreed. "Like me." Grant's arm slipped around her waist. "You were never frightened for long, stubborn, yes, determined, absolutely, but never afraid, not really." Emma leaned into him. "I was terrified. But you gave us safety when we needed it most." "You gave me something far greater," Grant countered. "A family, a purpose beyond just building a ranch." He touched Sarah's dark curls gently. "I never legally adopted her, you know. We should rectify that." The following spring, they traveled to Cheyenne, where a judge officially recognized Sarah as Sarah Ironwood, daughter of Grant and Emma. The little girl, now nearly 6, solemnly signed her new name on the document with careful letters. "Are you truly my papa now?" she asked Grant as they left the courthouse. Grant knelt before her. "I've been your papa since the day I found you and your mama under that cottonwood tree, sweet girl. This paper just tells the world what we already knew in our hearts." Life at Double Creek settled into a rhythm marked by seasons rather than days. William grew into a sturdy boy with his father's quiet strength and his mother's quick mind. Sarah blossomed into a capable young girl who could ride as well as any ranch hand, and still find time to help Emma with her younger siblings, for the family had grown again with the addition of twins, Margaret and James, born when Sarah was 8. On Sarah's 10th birthday, Grant presented her with a journal bound in soft leather. "Your mother tells me you have a way with words," he said as Sarah ran her fingers over the cover. "Thought you might want to write down your stories." "What stories should I write, Papa?" Sarah asked. Grant smiled. "Start with your own, how a brave little girl and her sister found a home." That evening, as the children slept and the ranch settled into night's quiet, Emma and Grant sat on the porch swing that had become their evening ritual. At 41, Grant's dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples and fine lines marked the corners of his eyes. To Emma, he was more handsome than ever. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Taking us in that day," Grant's arm tightened around her shoulders. "What kind of question is that?" "A foolish one," Emma admitted. "But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come along the trail that day." "I don't," Grant said firmly. "Some things are meant to be, Emma. I believe with all my heart that I was supposed to find you beneath that tree." He took her hand, running his thumb over the gold band he'd placed there 12 years earlier. "Every day since has been a gift." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the stars emerge above their land, their home. She thought of the frightened young woman she'd been, of the strong girl Sarah had become, of the family they'd built together from the most unlikely beginning. "When I was a girl," she said softly, "my father used to say that home isn't a place but the people who love you. I didn't understand that until I met you." Grant turned to kiss her, his lips as tender as they'd been on their wedding day. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ironwood," he whispered. "Welcome home." In the years that followed, Double Creek Ranch became known throughout the territory not just for its fine cattle and horses, but for the family that ran it. Travelers spoke of the Ironwoods' hospitality, of the way the ranch seemed to welcome all who came in peace. And sometimes, when visitors asked how Grant and Emma had met, Sarah, now a young woman with her mother's grace and her father's steady gaze, would open the leather journal that had long since been filled and refilled with the story of their family. "It began," she would read, "with an orphan girl left by the trail until a cowboy took her in and gave her his last name." But that was only the beginning of their story, our story, which proves that even in the wild lands of Wyoming, love can bloom in the most unexpected places, turning strangers into family and turning tragedy into the greatest blessing of all.